Coming up on this episode, I'm joined by Lievin Ndimanyi to discuss everything around the league. We start with the in-season tournament where 4 teams have made it through to Vegas for the semi-final and then what they hope is the final. We also discuss the MVP awards, some of the young teams and players that are making their mark around the league, and some of the teams that need to make a deal before February's mid-season trade deadline. Welcome, Lee. Great to have you back on the podcast tonight. We've had a couple of in-season tournament games, but before we get on to that and the big games today, I just want to talk about your own basketball because we're about a week removed from you and I playing in a 6-man game, I suppose. We played probably 5 or 6 games of 3-on-3 to 21. And if I'm right in recalling, I don't think you were part of a winning team in any of the 5 or 6 games. What do you make of that, and what have you got to say for yourself?
Yeah, I've had a long week of reconsidering my career, I think, in basketball. I do blame the rust. I haven't touched the basketball in a while, but you and Jack Larry made sure to remind me that that's not a good enough excuse. Yeah, I just can't find my shooting stroke, keep getting blown past. I think I'll just stick to podcasting, man. I reckon that's what my career's calling me for, and I'll call it a day.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I'm at about that point too, although it is good fun. Anyway, let's get talk about some NBA basketball. So the in-season tournament here, we're down to our last 4 teams, of course, heading to Vegas. We had the Bucks beating the Knicks 146-122, a bit of a blowout in the second half there. Knicks basically best defense in the league, gave up 146 points. I mean, that's what the Bucks can do with Dame and Chris Middleton and Giannis, obviously. And then the second game, a bit of a controversial ending with the Suns and the Lakers. Lakers getting the job done, but not after, or only after, a controversial timeout call where the Lakers seemingly didn't have control of possession and magically were able to call a timeout and retain possession, which was probably fortunate. Don't know if you saw that. Don't know if you have any comments on it. But as we get down to the last 4 teams here, as we head to Vegas, are you sold on the whole in-season tournament? I mean, for you as a Heat fan, how disappointed are you to not be in the final 4 teams?
As a Heat fan, I'm slightly disappointed, but as an NBA fan, I'm stoked with the in-season tournament. I had my hesitancy at the start. I didn't know where it fit in. I can't imagine why anyone would care. And I remember seeing Marcus Smart saying, we don't really care about this. We care more about the Larry O'Brien trophy. But apparently this is something that's been in the works. Did, a little bit of digging on it. Back in 2009, originally somebody that was working in the NBA front office put it ahead, but they said no. But Adam Silver's championed it, and the games that we've had, some of the attendance records are the highest they've ever had for a November, I think I was reading, and the intensity is just on another level. Where you fit into the NBA calendar just didn't really quite click, but what I've kind of seen and heard and people likening it to, I guess, us AFL fans, there's games like a perfect example, like the Anzac Day game that you and I know very well. It doesn't add anything to the medals and stuff like that. Over time, there was tradition and it's just built up, and there's a little extra something on it too. College football, they have their rivalry games too that are always just a little bit, there's just something to them. So I am unbelievably stoked with the level of basketball, what Halliburton has become, and for him to have, I was so happy for him to have that game. And I think people were watching it for the first time ever because the Twitter blew up on that shot that he took. So I'm well and truly and 100% sold on the in-season tournament, watching it adamantly. Can't wait to see. They're going to obviously make tweaks for it in the future. There's going to be little bits here and there that they're going to have to do it. I love that young teams are able to, the players that, the young teams like the Pacers, beg your pardon, the players are coming out of nowhere. So me and myself was quite hesitant, but now couldn't be happier, I don't reckon. Where did you sit on the in-season tournament in the first place when you even heard of it coming into the NBA? What was your first thought?
Yeah, I wasn't sure, how much we were going to be able to buy into it, but I think like most people, I've been turned on my head, I suppose, in terms of my interest in it, and I think it's been huge. I think it's been a fantastic addition. My only thing, and this is what I question all along, and I continue to question, is does it have to be so early in the season? Like, it started a few weeks into the season. I feel like there's still enough interest around the league in November and even at this point of the season where maybe you could push it back a bit. Like, I think the whole tournament should be played in January. So you have your kind of first part of the season, then you have like Christmas Day, which is obviously probably the biggest day of the regular season. And then after that, I think that period between Christmas Day and like around the trade deadline, where obviously all the trade speculation stuff comes up at the start of February, I think that is the period where I would just play the whole tournament and have your Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then do essentially exactly what you've done here, but just in the month of January. Because for me personally, I still have interest in the NBA at this point in the season. It's just more so that January time of year where you're between Christmas and then you're waiting around for the trade deadline and all the moves that generally happen there. So that would be my only thing on it. Otherwise, I don't have any issues whatsoever, and I'm incredibly happy with how it's ran, and incredibly excited for these last 3 games in Vegas. Do you have a team that you expect? Do you have a favorite here out of the Lakers, Pelicans, Bucks, or Pacers?
I think the Bucks are personally like turning a corner with they've obviously had a bit of a slower start, their defense, but I'm really liking what the intensity that Giannis, I think, just as a leader. But I think the in-season tournament, I 100% agree. I think January there is that lull period where you're just checking scores. It feels like sometimes there. So I was curious because Giannis, maybe because I was watching him today, the intensity that he was coming with. I saw LeBron saying that he wants the 500K, even though he's a billionaire and stuff like that. There's been some changes recently to the NBA, like the All-Star games and stuff like that. And I feel like the NBA players haven't been as excited for those sort of things. So I'm curious, like, I guess because you're watching these games every day, why do you think the players, like, the money's obviously a huge deal, 500 grand, but some of them are, even like the superstars, for them to care as much as they are. What do you reckon the incentive is, or do you reckon just as players, they're realizing that as fans are getting a little bit bored as some of them being bored in a way?
Yeah. I just think they're insanely competitive. So put a financial incentive, put just a physical trophy at the end of the line, and they will chase that. And at some point in the future, like, I'm not saying it's now, I still think it's obviously in its infancy and it doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. Like, I'm not overly devastated that the Warriors aren't in Vegas playing in the semifinals or then the final. But I think in the future, it might actually become a thing where you're an NBA Cup champion. That might actually mean something to your legacy. And we might start to view it differently than what we see it right now, which I'm sure some of us came into this thing, it's a little Mickey Mouse competition. It won't hang around. I think it's shown that it will hang around. And I think in time, as we go further along, I think that'll actually add to players' legacies. And some players are probably already seeing that now and saying, well, it might not mean much now, but if I can go down as an NBA Cup champion, then that might actually mean something in 15, 20 years' time once the tournament is up and going and really off the ground. So I think it's that fact. I think, most players love their teammates, and, especially for the rookies and guys on minimum contract deals, 500K does actually mean something. So I'm sure that, a lot of these veteran or, star level players are wanting to win for their teammates as well to get a bit of extra cash in the purse. So there's a variety of reasons, but I think wholeheartedly, I think they're just ultra competitive guys. They have to be to get to that level and throw a bit more incentive, which I was always questioning the incentive, whether like the financial aspect was going to be enough. But I think that combined with literally just a physical trophy at the end kind of thing, I think that's enough for these guys to really get up and about for it.
I couldn't agree more. I just saw the intensity that Giannis came with today, and I saw that back in the finals when he was winning his chip. But that's, I think, just bragging rights in itself. Seeing teams that take that leap. So, is it the Bucks for you? Do you see the surely up and coming against?
Honestly, like I think the Bucks would probably have to be favourites. Although KD said post game that it's kind of set up for the Lakers. They don't obviously have to travel too far to get to Vegas. I mean, that refereeing decision at the end, a lot of fans on Twitter saying that this stuff is rigged. I don't think that's the case, because I'm sure the NBA would have been more than happy to have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker in Vegas playing as well. I'd love to see the Pacers win, because I think this kind of tournament, these one-game eliminations are set up for a team like Indiana. I said, tweeted out before yesterday's game where they beat the Celtics, I tweeted out, like this NBA Cup is made for the Indiana Pacers, because I think their lack of defense across a 7-game playoff series, I'd be surprised if they win a playoff series this season. I really would. I just think you need to have some kind of defensive capacity across a 7-game series. They don't right now. However, they are one of the best and most potent offenses in the league. And in any one game, they can put up 130, 140 points and win any individual game. Now, they didn't actually have to do that against the Celtics. Their defense was actually reasonable yesterday. But I look at the Bucks matchup, and if these two teams went into a 7-game series, I would put the Bucks at like 90% chance of winning. But maybe I might make it like 60-40 now, because, as I said, the Pacers offense is that potent, and the Bucks defense we know hasn't been great so far this season. So could Tyrese Halliburton have 30 and 15 and help Indiana put up 130 points and win the semifinal against Milwaukee? Maybe. Could see it.
Yeah, mate, I want to also wake up call to a couple of teams. Obviously, very early in the season, but I just looked at how the Boston Celtics collapsed yesterday, and I saw what them not having Porzingis in the lineup, what that did for them. They'll go back to the drawing board. What a great way if you've got championship aspirations, if you brought in a bunch of new players. You really want to see Tyrese Halliburton, whether he can be that guy, that number one on a team. It's a great litmus test for teams, and mate, I couldn't be happier for this. And I've also got.
Can I just add something on that as well? How you said that you get to kind of see what your team looks like in higher level basketball early in the season. Was it a coincidence that the Celtics got eliminated yesterday, and within 24 hours there's a report from Shams saying that they're going to be active at the trade deadline?
I love the panicking of the NBA.
Is there a coincidence in that? I don't know.
I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it, man. I couldn't be happier.
You got any big statements, any questions you want to make off the first kind of quarter of the season so far?
Well, I'm going to go straight for you as my mates, unfortunately, and just bring up the Warriors. I have been a pain in my side for many a year, being the LeBron stan that I am. Steph Curry, that NBA Finals, I still think we don't talk about how great he was at that time. But this collapse, mate, I think it's because everything that I saw the Warriors do for your run was I'm just not seeing anymore. I mean, it always felt... What annoyed me most about the Warriors was it always felt like you were just smarter than every other team. The players that you were bringing in, people that wouldn't really be household names, and then you'd see them after they leave the Warriors and they don't even look like the same player anymore. So your signings, I think, not performing is just a kind of a shock for someone like me. You're drafting your big three, not one of them were in the top 3 picks or anything like that, but then what you're able to turn them into, but then to come out with a Wiseman thing like that, these things are kind of, maybe it's just blowing my mind as somebody that's been watching the Warriors pretty closely. Steph having to do everything. I remember when he was winning his MVPs, what was always brought up was how few minutes he's playing. He rarely played some fourth quarters because he was just that far ahead in the team basketball. So I hesitate to say the Warriors era is over, but the transition period, the people that are supposed to carry you into the future, it's just not working at all. And the Clay situation's coming up. I'm curious, are you ready to call it over, or can you not call it over because number 30 is still on the Golden State Warriors?
Well, I can't call it over. I'm just not going to do that. But I can give you some legitimate, factual reasons, I suppose. Or not factual reasons, but opinionated reasons with some evidence, I suppose, as to why I could still see them. I'm trying to compare here. Could they make a run like the Lakers did in the last season, where they started off the season horrifically and ended up getting to the Western Conference Finals? I could see something like that happening, not necessarily because they make a hostile number of changes like the Lakers did, obviously at the deadline. But there's a few things here that go into current their 9-11 records so far. Which, first of all, they've had factually they've had the toughest schedule in the league, factually, and then I think as a result they've got the 3rd or 4th easiest remaining schedule across the last 60 games. They've had Draymond suspended for 5 games, which is his own fault. Dumb. But, if he plays a couple of those games, they probably win. They've lost 5 games by 4 points or less. And this has been my biggest frustration, I suppose, is they've been in most games.
Leads. Yeah,
they've blown leads. I mean, they had before last week, they were 288-4 in the Steve Kerr era when leading by 20 plus points. Then they lost 2 games in the space of 3, went up by 20 plus. They were up 72-48 to the Kings and then up 70-48 against the Clippers and lost both games last week. So 5 games lost by 4 points or less. That doesn't include, I don't know if you recall, the Chet Holmgren buzzer-beating 3 that forced the game to overtime, where the Warriors probably could have fouled and just won that game. So that's 6 games, basically, that could have gone either way. And I'm kind of, for optimistic Warrior fans, I'm trying to preach here that, hey, if they'd actually just gone 3-3 in those 6 games, which I don't think is too much of a, I'm not asking them to go 6-0. I'm not saying you can't lose close games. But if you go 3-3 in that stretch, all of a sudden you're 12-8 and they're 4th in the Western Conference, and we're not having this conversation. We're just not. Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins couldn't have possibly been any worse than what they have been.
Oh my God, Wiggins.
And then Andrew Wiggins decided to go jam his finger in a car door. I don't know what's going on there, and missed 2 games, but whatever. The most optimistic things, I suppose, Steph is still a top 5 player in the league. And I think if Steph had regressed significantly so far this season, if you looked at Steph now and said, okay, he's no longer a top 5 player in the league, he might not even be a top 10 player in the league, then that's when you say the dynasty's over. But so long as Steph is a top 5 player in the league, you still have to think there are some sort of chance. Klay's had 4 20-point outings in his last 5 games. He's starting to come around a little bit more. Wiggs has made 50% of his threes in his last 5 games. Obviously missed the last 2 with a finger injury. He's starting to come around a little bit with his shooting. Had 29 and 31-point games in 2 of those 5 games. The Chris Paul thing has actually worked to a degree. So there's no real issues there, although I'm not saying that you couldn't trade him at the trade deadline for a piece that fits better, probably a 2-way forward or something like that. Draymond is still playing at a fairly high level and is shooting the ball at 47% from 3 for some strange reason after 7 seasons in a row at between 27 and 30%. Makes no sense, but he's knocking down threes. And my last thing that I want to put into this is that I'm still not entirely convinced with the Western Conference. So the Nuggets, by them, are clear and away the best team in the West, and it's not particularly close, in my opinion. But obviously that leaves someone else to make the Western Conference Finals. The Lakers look good, but again, I'm not hugely convinced. They're not a great matchup for the Warriors. So I think the Warriors, as presently constructed, would struggle in a playoff series again against the Lakers. But we'll wait and see. And then you got these young teams. Minnesota. I love what Minnesota are doing. I love their defensive identity. Cat and Gobert in the playoffs still scare the shit out of me if I'm a Timberwolves fan. Like that duo in the playoffs, I'm not sold. And then the Thunder are just young, and they remind me a little bit of Sacramento last season, where they could end up being, a 3rd seed in the West, but they could probably get knocked off by the 6th seed or something because of a lack of experience come the playoffs, which is what we saw with the Kings and the Warriors last season. So aside from Denver, I'm just not totally convinced about all these other teams in the West. And I do think the Warriors could still make a run here. Now, obviously, they're battling just to make the play-in tournament right now, but it's early. We're a quarter of the way into the season. There's 60 games to go. They've got the 3rd or 4th easiest schedule remaining. I don't know. That's my reasoning for why I'm saying it's not over quite yet.
I don't count out the Warriors team as long as Steph Curry is a starting point guard. That's just the number. To me, to be as uncharacteristic as you have been, to blow leads, to not find some random Hall of Famer in the second round or something like that. It's just really
can I push back on your comment before about the signings? I would argue Dario Saric has probably been maybe the 2nd best player on the Warriors this season, if not the 3rd. Which is not a good thing. That's not a good thing. That's like an indictment on his teammates. But just opposing your comment of signings not making contributions, Dario Saric has been really good. The issue for the Warriors is that Steph's clearly obviously the best player. There's way too much reliance on him. And then between the 2nd best and the 10th best player on the roster, not a whole lot of difference. Like, not a whole lot of, like, Brandon Pajemski as a first-round pick is, like, and I don't know if you've heard some of my recent podcasts talking about that segment in the draft where you guys got Hame Hackers Jr. and then we got Pajemski after that. Those two guys have been absolutely brilliant. But, like, Pajemski's better than Clay on some of these nights. And like, Moses Moody is better than Clay on some of these nights. And so it's offering up real question marks for Steve Kerr in terms of what rotations and what lineups he plays, because there's legitimately only probably two players who deserve to, like, close games, and that's Steph and Draymond. And then it's like could be absolutely anyone else after that. And I know, like, a lot of Warrior fans are frustrated with Steve Kerr because some of his lineup and rotations decisions, some of the minutes he's handing out to certain players, are not reflective of the form. Like, Clay's still getting 30 minutes a game and Moses Moody's only getting 17 or 18, even when Moody's playing better on some of the, in a lot of these games. So there's a lot of frustration with Steve Kerr there. But, I could speak about it for hours.
Well, the Warriors have proof for me to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I just wanted to make sure I was talking next to it before I made any drastic calls.
Very fair.
There. What else have you got for me? What else you saying?
All right. So looking at some of these teams, these young teams who I've been really excited to watch play, there seems to be maybe a little bit of a changing of the guard. Like, guys like Steph and KD and LeBron are still fantastic and great. There's no doubt about that. But I think this is the season where some of these young teams, some of these young players are really taking a major leap here and kind of signifying themselves as top 10 players in the league. In terms from a team aspect, which of these young teams out of the Orlando Magic, Oklahoma City Thunder, and Indiana Pacers do you have most faith in maintaining their current top 6 seed in the respective conferences?
This one was a pretty easy answer for me. The OKC, just obsession. I went through the group chat the other day. There was messages from me, I reckon middle of last year, saying he's going to be a bust. This guy, there's no way he's too skinny. He's going to be absolutely horrible. You can book it. And now a lot of egg on my face at the moment. Okay, his development in this time span has accelerated their window in such a short amount of time. I still thought they were maybe one more person away from it. I also thought the timelines might be a little bit off because he's 21 and SGA's 25 from memory, but he's accelerated it. And I'd always bring up that it's going to be a big man's league, and this new era of big man, that because obviously there was a weird part where the wings and guards were big players in it, but this era of big man and what they can do. I watched his full game. The only full game I've watched of Chet Holmgren was against Joel Embiid, and he had 33 on him. The biggest point everyone talked about was how skinny he was. He won't be able to keep up with the other big men in the NBA. For him to go head-to-head with the reigning MVP, and then Joel Embiid's 280, 300 pounds in himself, to hold his own. Chet Holmgren's not really scared of anyone, at least I've seen. He gets dunked on a fair bit, actually, but he's not afraid to contest anything. What he has become has accelerated the Thunder, and I'm so confident in them maintaining their spot. And they're going to be so pesky to play against. I'd have to see the matchup, whether I want to make a big call as to whether they'll win the playoff series, but they're going to make it really, really hard on any team early on in there. So it's also super comforting, I think, because we had faith in OKC. We knew that they were stars, they were developed incredibly, but I'm just talking about just an NBA fan. To be able to say they're going to be good and then to watch them actually be good is awesome. So out of those three, I'll probably go the Thunder first, Magic second. What Paolo's growing into is freakish, and the number of assets is crazy. And Halliburton, as I said, I'm just going to be happy for somebody like him who seems just a classy person around the league, well respected. The numbers he's putting up, I don't think I'm really computing too much. So I'll probably put them third. So Thunder, I think the second at the moment. Pretty comfortable with them, probably staying as a top 4 seed for the rest of the season.
So Can I just clarify? So you've got the Pacers, I suppose, third in terms of your faith of maintaining in the top 6. Do you still expect Indiana to be a top 6 seed at the end of the season?
do worry about first of all their defense. I think you've got to be able the numbers they're putting up offensively, but I think they're quite like almost bottom third in defense, and Halliburton does so much for them. But teams like that have that reliance, I do fear that people will start putting together game plans for Halliburton moving forward. So I don't have anything. Sixth, staying top six. How do you see those three teams?
Yeah, I see them exactly the same. My first point on the Thunder, and I just want to ask you again quickly here. Right now, who would you rather? Would you rather SGA or would you rather Halliburton on your team as a number one guy?
That's a tough one. I'm gonna go SGA, but purely because I've just got the body of work compared to Halliburton. Yeah. I've just seen him prove it too much. That's not an easy answer. How would you say it?
Yeah, well, my initial point was I have the Thunder. I have the most faith in the Thunder because they have a top 10 guy in SGA, who I do think is a top 10 player in the league. Although that might be a moot point when we're talking about these three teams, because Halliburton might also be a top 10 player in the league.
Correct.
If he's not, he's very close. He's top 12, I would say. Anyway, but I do have the same order as you. The Magic second. The Pacers, the defensive issue is just that's what puts them last for me. The Magic have two really good guys in Paolo and Franz. Watching Franz all the time just gives me absolute nightmares. Makes me feel physically ill because we passed on him in the 2021 draft, and like watching him play, he'd just be perfect for Golden State right now. Like he could literally. I think I tweeted out the other day. Like you could, if you just added him to the Warriors, like just traded Kuminga for Franz right up because straight up because that was obviously we had picked Kuminga 7th and Franz 8th, and I still have higher hopes for JK. Like it is what it is. But if you just swap those two guys right now, the Warriors might be the second best team in the West behind the Nuggets. And that's how good Franz is. I'm being dead set. I'm legitimately being like, imagine if you could just throw him in there, like unbelievable. And then Paolo's great. They're elite defensively. They're third in defensive rating at the moment. Their average offensively, like they're 14th. They could probably do with maybe another shot creator and playmaker in there. I do wonder if they could be a team that makes a trade here at the deadline for. I don't know if I've seen some linkage between them and Zach LaVine. I'm not sure he's necessarily the guy, but they could probably try and get another guy to bolster their offense. They've been missing Wendell Carter Jr. a little bit over the last few games here, which probably hurts them offensively a little bit with his ability to stretch the floor. So that is what I would have: the Thunder, the Magic, and then the Pacers, as you did.
Oh, mate, you said changing the guards, but just the play styles that they have, how modern they are. SGA with his weird, like, the driving to the cup as much as he does, and then what Paolo is, this hybrid guy, and then obviously Chet Holmgren, who, I could not be more wrong about how what he's become. I'll have a look at the messages later. You'll piss yourself laughing on there. We are really early into the season, but I've already got Jokic. I've right here. Jokic already has the MVP sign up. It's kind of hard for him because he's quite literally just competing against his own numbers. 29, 13, and 9 is what he's putting up. I mean, it's pretty much a triple-double for the last 3-4 years. His second best player, Jamal Murray, has only played 8 games. Reggie Jackson slots in a point guard. They're 14 and 7 right at the top of the West. They're beating again, there is no answer. And the gap between him and second best player in the NBA, it's quite scary at the moment. I know Luka's always in MVP talks. Tatum goes up and down, truthfully, but he's putting up the numbers there. Embiid would definitely have a case. I can't see him winning MVP. I feel like NBA well doesn't. I've got a weird feeling about Embiid. Jokic, you said how much they are better than every other team in the West. Am I being dramatic in saying that it's like the gap is getting almost to the point where he's pretty much got to sign up?
Oh yeah, he'd have to fall over and get injured. He'd have to get injured. And honestly, I was having this conversation with someone yesterday, and you're right. Like the gap between him, I think everyone else is just huge. And you look at the Ringers player rankings that came out earlier in the day. You've got. I was nicely surprised to wake up and see that like they had Steph second, still as the second best player in the league. So cool. But the gap between Steph and like LeBron, who's 10th, or even I think Halliburton was outside the top 10. Like the difference between Steph and like Halliburton, wherever he was, like 11 or 12 or whatever, the gap between those two is smaller than the gap between Jokic and Steph. Like there is a much bigger gap between Jokic and Steph, and then Steph and the 10th, 11th best player in the league. So I don't think it's particularly close. As I said, Jokic would have to fall over. Just a quick stat back on the Warriors. Steph is the only player in that top 16 on the Ringer rankings that team is not currently in the playoffs if the season ended tomorrow, which is absurd. He's still seen as the second best player in the league, and yet the other 15 players around him are all currently in the playoff mix, and the Warriors are 11th. Anyway, still early in the season. Just thought I'd point that out. But yeah, Jokic, he'd have to fall over. I did like. Is there some element of voter fatigue? And as you said, like just comparing to his previous numbers. I mean, he didn't win it last season, so I think like the voter fatigue kind of happened last season where he probably should have won it then. Probably didn't because of voter fatigue, and now I think you just give it to him again. The funny thing is, you could argue Embiid's having a better season than he did last season, just with some of his kind of playmaking stuff and the assist numbers. He's been really good, but it's still Jokic. It's still Jokic. Like it's not even close.
The team, people talk about teams like adopting play styles and stuff like that. I remember like we talk about the Warriors a lot today, but like the shots that like players would take that were trying to imitate Steph Curry's teammates. But I'm seeing like Michael Porter Jr. try these passes, and if you can get him to pass the ball, you must be the MVP of the league. So Jokic, and very comfortably at that too.
All right, last one from me here. Because we are like it'll be Christmas in a minute, and then the following minute it'll be the mid-season trade deadline. For you, 20-odd game, first 20 games or so, which teams in each conference desperately need to make a trade? Give me one from each conference.
Yeah, I've gone one from each conference. I've gone a super obvious one, and I don't need to be an NBA reporter to tell this. The Chicago Bulls are having a historically bad time at the moment. I just went back in their timeline. I remember when they're the top of the West, top of the East, beg your pardon, and DeMar DeRozan was like an MVP candidate.
That was when Lonzo was playing.
When Lonzo was healthy, and like things were looking.
It seems
really
like
good
an eternity ago now.
It does feel like that, actually. And I was quite impressed how quickly they built the team up, because I know they tanked and they traded for Vooch, and then to be able to make those signings, to be able to build that team in such a short amount of space and then rise to the top. I was so impressed with the Bulls. But when you look back at it now, you just mentioned Wendell Carter Jr., who's will always be remembered for the trade with Vooch. The trade, when you squint, it was a future first, Franz Wagner and Wendell Carter for Vooch, who they just re-signed to another contract in the last year. So it makes you
horrifically bad.
It seems like they just. It was a year late. They're a year late to me. So obviously Lonzo Ball, you could never predict that he's going to have all these injury issues. And you were right. When Lonzo was playing, they were absolutely flying. And if you look at a backcourt of a healthy Lonzo with his triple-double ability, with the tools to be a defender, and then Zach LaVine scoring, that's a match made in heaven. But around like mid-season last year, you could tell he wasn't even close to returning. And I feel like you could have started, and you were slipping as an NBA team as is. People have already been making calls for Caruso. I just feel like they weren't seeing it, and now they're a year late, and everyone's like value is just plummeting. And all I really see in value, like Caruso, I feel like you get people, but you've still got him on the roster. I feel like teams will throw multiple first-round picks at you for Caruso. The LaVine situation just keeps getting murkier every game. I feel like his value is starting to not be as high as you might think. And that's a monstrous contract, $40 million, and still multiple years on that. And the drafting, how badly you've missed with Kobe White and Patrick Williams. Sam Ferguson sent us a photo of Patrick Williams saying he's going to want a $200 million contract. Patrick Miller might be one of the worst top 5 picks in recent. Him and Kobe White. Kobe White was top 7th, I think, on there. And if you miss in your top 10 picks and you can't even trade them, like I don't know what I doubt you get any value for those two at the moment. It really, really sets you back. So the Chicago Bulls, how quickly they've fallen off, and the fact they feel like they're a year late, I feel like they need to make a trade and be quite desperate at that. And then one team that I rarely, maybe because Miami Twitter is starting to talk about it, so they're on my radar at the moment. The Utah Jazz are a team that I think need to really be a bit, be self-aware and be wary of falling into traps that because how often do you and I talk about that 10th seed spot that you don't want to be in? Obviously, the start to the season was unbelievable. Start of last year, and Lauri Markkanen out of nowhere. But maybe because I've been seeing him in trade rumours at the moment because they're sitting around that 10, 11th mark at the moment. Lauri Markkanen, he had the incredible season last year, All-Star, and his purpose built for today's NBA. That's amazing. How far are you really getting with Lauri Markkanen as your number one NBA player? And you might worry. I'm scared that you're going to pay him this monstrous contract just out of fear of wanting to lose him when there'll be a dozen teams in the first day if you say he's up for a trade. And I guess maybe because I start to look back to because he had the Chicago Bull stint. He was young at that point, so you couldn't really throw too much onto him there. Then he went to Cleveland, but that was a weird fit. And then he's had this season on there. So it's great that he's had his career resurgence or whatever, but no one ever thought of him as this guy that's going to be the head of a franchise ever. Yeah. And obviously the team was good and they slipped off towards the end. I do fear that if you continue with him moving forward, he hits his ceiling. Maybe it just ends up being that guy that's just putting huge numbers because there's no one else to take the shots at that team. So I think the Utah Jazz are somebody, you're not getting free agents aren't coming to Utah. You should know that. And you've got to really be aware of how you navigate your assets and everything moving forward. So Chicago Bulls absolutely need to make a trade. But somebody like the Utah Jazz, I thought, and just want to put a message out to Lauri Markkanen in South Beach. You would fit perfectly at Miami. Just want to make that very clear.
Hands off him. Thanks. I will say, so last episode I did, obviously, on the Warriors, I said I was going to reveal my ideal trade target for the Warriors, and it is, without a doubt, Lauri Markkanen. So let's take our Warrior and Heat hats off for a second. If you're the Jazz, would you consider trading Lauri Markkanen if you got a big deal?
I would.
Yeah.
So think about it, because you're 10, 11th. You haven't left there. It's only early, but you're not going to really go anywhere. The West is also. You said you can't trust anyone, but it is very competitive. You're playing against someone very tough every single night. So if you're staying here, you start thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I don't think Markkanen's the number one guy, and so if you're the Jazz, his value right now is probably the highest it's ever been. I would say he was obviously most improved player last season. He's still having he's averaging over 23 points a game this season, still being great. I would jump off a cliff to see him in a Warrior jersey. I just would, and part of the reason, from a playing standpoint, he would just be the perfect second scorer behind Steph. We need another big forward. He's a 7-footer with unbelievable offensive skill set. Put him next to Draymond. Put him next to Wiggins in that front court. Oh, sign me up wherever. But the other thing with him is he's on $18.7 million or whatever. And don't worry, I've been on the trade machine. The Warriors can actually get up to that salary without giving up any of their current, they wouldn't have to give up CP3, they wouldn't have to give up Clay, they wouldn't have to give up Wiggins, they obviously wouldn't give up Steph or Dre. They could get to Markkanen by basically giving up all their young guys like Kuminga, Moody, Podziemski, Jackson Davis, Corey Joseph for salary reasons, and then whatever picks it takes to get Markkanen. And they could be left over with Steph, Clay, Wiggs, Markkanen, Dre, that still have Looney, Surridge, Chris Paul, Gary Payton II coming off the bench. Sign me up. Sign me up. Get on the phone to Danny Ainge and make that happen, Mike Dunleavy Jr. He's my ideal trade target for the Warriors, and I think he's somewhat gettable for the reasons we've just laid out, for the fact that I don't think he's a number one guy, but for a team like the Warriors who needs a number two guy, wow. For that salary, and you've got him again next season at $18 million as well. So you don't have to pay him this offseason. You got him again on one of the best contracts in the NBA. I want to go back to the Bulls for a second, just quickly, because I concur with everything you said. I don't want to comment on Patrick Williams because the Warriors took James Wiseman 2 picks before him, so it's not like I really want to comment on that too much.
What a bad draft.
I mean, outside of Ant, LaMelo, and Tyrese, there's not too much. Yeah. There's not too much going on there. But concur on the Bulls. There's a guy that I follow on Twitter who's an NBA analyst, watches a heap of games. I really respect him, and he said he was watching some Chicago Bulls basketball because they've actually won a couple of games in recent times. And he tweeted out and said, you know what, the Bulls aren't a complete disaster. And my initial thought was, yeah, you're right, but that's the problem, is that they're not a complete disaster. And so they have these odd wins here and there, and they're going to stay around like the 9th to 11th seed in the East and be this okay team, but they're never going to do anything of significance until they blow it up, get rid of all their guys, go into full rebuild mode, try and get multiple, top 3, top 5 picks again. Like, that is the issue, is they're not a complete disaster. They're actually okay. They can win some games. That's the problem. Anyway, the other team that I had outside the Bulls, now this is on the other end of the spectrum. Right, so I think when you look at trades, you often think of teams that are either underperforming or they should be tanking, like the Jazz, and they're probably overperforming and they need to just ramp it down a little bit. I'm going the other way. I think the Thunder need to make a trade, because if I'm the Oklahoma City Thunder, I think I can win the West, and if I can win the West and make the finals, why would you wait? Stop taking Shea for granted. Get another piece in there. You've got a gazillion first-round picks. Stop hoarding them all and do something that pushes you incredibly close to Denver. And the other thing I would say, and why I say this about the Thunder and why I don't say it about a team like the Magic, like if I was the Magic, I would wait. And the reason for that is I think they are clearly behind the Celtics, the Bucks, and the 76ers. They are clearly behind 3 teams. If I'm the Thunder right now, I'm clearly behind one team. That's the Nuggets. What's stopping Denver from having a Jamal Murray or a Michael Porter Jr. injury in the Western Conference Finals and falling over? Like, you've got to try and either say that, okay, let's make a deal to make us, really close. And even if we're not quite at Denver's level, maybe there's an injury or something happens in the Western Conference Finals where we can beat them and make the NBA Finals. And if I'm the Orlando Magic, I don't think that 3 teams are going to fall over all of a sudden and I'm going to make it out of the East. So that's why I'm saying as the Thunder would make a trade, the Magic can probably hold as they are for the moment. And before this whole stuff happened with Josh Giddey, and this is the first time I've mentioned it in any time, obviously I haven't wrote about it, I haven't spoke about it at all. Obviously a big thing for us as Australians. Before the whole Josh Giddey allegations, I watched him play the last game he played against the Warriors. That dude needs, and it's going to be impossible now because of what's happening, but that guy needs to be off the team. Josh Giddey should not be on the team anymore. He does not fit with the emergence of Chet, with Jalen Williams. Josh Giddey's like, at best, the 4th option in the starting lineup offensively. He's not a guy that can play off the ball as a catch-and-shoot threat. He's shooting like 25% from 3 this season. He's not a great defender either. And so a guy like Cason Wallace, who's a first-round pick, who can shoot the ball off the catch and who is a great defender, he's just a much better fit than Josh Giddey. So if these allegations never happened and we were just going along as we were here, I would be almost demanding, for the good of the Thunder and for the good of Josh Giddey, that he get traded. Because I don't think he's the odd one out of those Thunder young players. Because I feel like guys like Cason Wallace, better 3-and-D guy that fits with Shea, Chet, and Jalen Williams. Even an Isaiah Joe, who's one of the best catch-and-shoot players in the league, he's a better fit than Giddey. Even if Giddey's just a better player overall, I don't think anyone's arguing that. I think the fit, Isaiah Joe's better. Like, I just think Giddey, like, he still holds, we did at least hold significant value around the league. I would cash him in, and I would just, again, the allegation stuff is going to make this not viable. But again, if that didn't happen or if that goes away, then I would package up Giddey. I'd package up all my picks and just see if you can go get another guy. See if you can get another. Could you go and get Pascal Siakam?
Yeah, I was going to say, have you got a name? Have you got a
Well,
type of player?
Pascal Siakam. You pair him next to Chet, so then your starting lineup would be like, I don't know, Shea, Cason Wallace, Jalen Williams, Siakam, Chet, or something like that. That's a good five, and they've got some bench depth. If I were them, I wouldn't be taking Shea for granted, and I'd be making a move to say, all right, we're going for it. We think we can win the title in a rookie season out of Chet Holmgren, and still a heap of young players. I reckon they're that close. They can make the argument right now they're second best team in the West behind the Nuggets. And if you're that close, you have a crack with, like, cool, give up 3-4 future first round picks. Cool, you've got another 12 in your back pocket. Like, what do they mean? What do they mean to you? Like, come on. Anyway, that's just, I know it's a bit of a hot take, I suppose, but that's who I had.
The longer you talk about it, the more I'm seeing the picture, because we both agreed Chet Holmgren, how perfect he is for this team is mind-blowing. And the draft was always back and forth. Him and Paolo. Jabari Smith was the number one pick for a little while on there. But now they'll look at their teams. Jabari Smith's obviously a little bit behind them in terms of development and talent level, but they've all just fit perfectly into their situations. SGA, because at the end of first of all, you want to know that you've got the guy for you, and I think that's why my hesitancy with Utah. I'm like, Laurie's not the guy for you, and what SGA has turned into, what he continues to grow into, he's got everything that you need to be that guy on there. Chet Holmgren's development on there, and maybe it's just the fact that we're talking about Lauri Markkanen, but I'm imagining Lauri Markkanen fitting in this team because
perfect.
Chet, as much as he's got the height and block shots and everything like that, but I feel like his game's a bit more interior. Out on the perimeter. And Lauri, I've said with his back to basket game, but now I'm imagining him, he won't be able to come to Miami if he's at OKC, and I feel like if he goes to the OKC, those 2 7-footers with their spacing, because them being able to, what Chet's shooting does for SGA's driving ability is mind-boggling. And the amount of time I see Giddey in the corner, you're not worried about Giddey lighting you up from outside. So, mate, okay, I'm in full agreement, and they're going to have to pull the trigger, and you have to be very delicate, because I've seen teams completely go the other way and this sort of thing. But you've got to trust their front court. What they've been, the players they've got through the OKC system over the last 10 years or so, and what they've been able to turn them into, their development staff or whatever, it needs to be studied, because the people they're finding is quite extraordinary.
And guess what? Guess what? They've got 0 titles to show for it. So have a damn crack. And I did forget to mention Lou Dort in that. So you could have Cason Wallace coming off the bench. You could have like Shea, Dort, Jalen Williams, Markkanen, Chet. Like, that is a huge lineup for starters in terms of height and size. Maybe Dort is the contract you throw in with Giddey to make the salary work or whatever, depending on who you get. But yeah, they've got some incredible talent, and I think that talent could be transitioned into making the Western Conference Finals, or making the NBA Finals if they were to go and take advantage of the future assets that they've got available to them.
Well, mate, right, the wave they're riding at the moment is unbelievable. Pull the trigger, I reckon. The final one I had for you, I've gone to the bottom end of the pits of the NBA, unfortunately. Detroit Pistons are becoming one of the worst teams I've seen in recent. I think they're double-digit losing streak.
16, I think.
Cunningham was somebody. 16 was a.
I think that's where we're up to.
Yeah, Kate Cunningham's just obviously had the year off, but as a talent, I think the guy at his size with his the skills, his efficiency is taking a massive hit, and I'm positive it's because it's literally him high pick and roll, and then he has to create for everyone. I don't really see any ball movement. He has no spacing whatsoever, so it ends up being the shot clock, him having to heave up this contested long two. So his efficiency is taking a hit. Monty Williams, what he transformed the Suns into was incredible, and the contract was huge, but I was excited for him to go to a young core in Detroit. I was happy for your man Wiseman to get a fresh start. I Marvin Bagley, haven't still seen anything, but maybe a fresh start might be something good for him. But it is one of the worst constructed rosters, I think, in recent memory. And Cade Cunningham, I would fear for a guy of his. I've gone dramatic and said he shouldn't sign an extension, he should demand a trade on there because I don't see a future for them. So the Jaden Ivey hasn't. Maybe this isn't the team for him. I know he's talented, and maybe this just isn't the team for him. Oscar Thompson, incredibly talented, cannot shoot the ball whatsoever. So he's not good for Cade Cunningham's play style. He needs somebody that's got incredible perimeter skills. Jalen Duren's talent as well, and his preseason was really good, but he gets kind of lost in that clunky front court with Beef Stew and Wiseman and Bagley and everyone there. Bogdanovic's still on the roster, which I still don't understand. They're going to be at the bottom of. I mean, they tanked. Obviously, they had no choice but to tank last year with Cade being out or whatever. They had the worst record from memory, and they ended up with a fifth pick. They're going to be bottom again. This is a poor draft coming up on there. So another draft pick being thrown in there isn't going to help them whatever. And I do fear they're just going to do some stupid spending in the offseason, try and bring in some vet to try and help them, and they're going to have this gigantic contracts on there. So Cade Cunningham, his future in Detroit, is it better for them? First of all, Cade as a player, I keep talking about this guy for them. Have you seen enough flashes from Cade Cunningham for him to be that potential, play that SGA role, play that number one guy for a team moving into the future? Or do you think it's already pulled the trigger on another rebuild already? Because you've got all these high-end draft picks sitting there, and I don't see any development. I haven't seen a system or anything in this short amount of time. So first of all, am I being dramatic? And how would you play out the Detroit Pistons position?
Yes, you are being incredible. What do you mean another rebuild? It's essentially year 2 of Cade Cunningham. You're asking for another rebuild. For Cade to move on in essentially year 2. That is very, very dramatic. If you substituted Cade Cunningham for Jaden Ivey, who is also in year 2, obviously Cade's in year 3, but he played like 5 games last season. Jaden Ivey in year 2, I'd request a trade if I was him, and he's a number 5 overall pick. Dude can't get minutes, and he's like coming off the bench and then starting some games, and like Monty Williams is for some reason preferring Killian Hayes, who we've now got like 3.5 years of data that he's no good at all. When Ivy actually showed some talent and showed some positive and impressive signs last season, that makes no sense to me at all. They have no shooting at all. Although, like, Bogdanovich is coming back, is back now, but which should actually help them. They play Memphis tomorrow in what should be one of the worst games of the season because Memphis are missing half their team still. I actually think Detroit might win that game. I'm banking it. I reckon they will break the 16-game streak. They will beat the Grizzlies tomorrow. I'm putting that out there. I don't know where it is actually. Is it in Detroit? If it's in Detroit, I think they might win.
16-game streak.
Who? Well, I'm just checking this. I don't know why we care. Yeah, it's in Detroit. I'm backing him in. There's nothing more certain than Bogdanovich being off the roster by the trade deadline. He's an absolute guarantee to be traded, and I can absolutely guarantee that Cade Cunningham isn't going anywhere. So, bit dramatic from you, and we probably have to finish up there. It's getting late. You're probably a little bit tired by the sounds of it with that comment. So, anyway, what's planned for you for the rest of the week, mate?
I thought we were going to play basketball tomorrow, but apparently not. So I might just get in the gym and hoist up a few shots, get myself ready for next week's game. Avoid another 0-6. What about you, mate?
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. No, not much else. Warriors play tomorrow. Big slate of games tomorrow, so looking forward to sitting down and watching that. Warriors against the Trailblazers at home. Pack up the season if we can't win that one. Pack it up.
Oh, boy.
That'd be a nightmare. Steph might request a trade if we lose that one. Anyway, thanks for joining me, mate. We'll have to have you back on shortly to discuss all things around the league.
Anytime, mate. Always happy.